Hey there, welcome to First Look from another mystery location in my house. This is the available room today, so thankful that you're here, and we're kind of moving forward into these last days before Advent, and we're kind of in an in-between week. So we've got something between All Saints, which was this past week, and Presbyterian Women's Sunday, which is the next week. And there we get to hear from Reverend Jessica McClure Archer, who is the executive presbyter of Pittsburgh, who will be bringing the message for PW Sunday. For this week, we have something that is one of those sort of weeks where I got a chance to play around and see what was available to me in terms of the lectionary. And there was this really interesting passage in Haggai that I thought that I would share. And Haggai is a text that we don't preach out of all the time, and so I thought this would be, a good experience for all of us. But it's on a subject that I think is near and dear to all of us, which is the subject and thought of restoration. And that's what I called the sermon. And we can think about restoration in lots of different ways and lots of different terms. Something that we need kind of restored within ourselves or within society or within relationships. Those are the types of things that the sermon will hopefully kind of touch on. But this particular one has to do with what was being restored for the people of Israel at the time that this was written. So let me read you the text first, and then hopefully that I can kind of build around it. So before I do that, I'll lay a little bit of groundwork so you know where we are, but then we'll get into it. So you know that, because we talk about it all the time, the idea of the exile. So 500-600 years before Jesus comes on the scene, you have the two divided kingdoms of Israel that were taken into exile, one to one country and one to another. So now we have the people who were in Babylon, who have been allowed to return, who are now working on how do we rebuild, how do we restore what was lost. So that's the basic place where we are, and then I'll layer some things in as we go. All right, so this is starting in chapter 1 verses 15 and then going through, I think, probably, I don't know, wherever I decide to stop. All right, so on the 24th day of the month in the 6th month, in the 2nd year of King Darius. King Darius is the king of Persia, which took over the Babylonians and allowed the people to go home. Okay. In the 7th month, on the 21st day of the month, the word of the Lord came by the prophet Haggai, saying, "Speak now to Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, governor of Judah, and to Joshua, son of Jehozadak, the high priest, and to the remnant of the people, and say, Who is left among you that saw this house in its former glory? How does it look to you now? Is it not in your sight as nothing? Yet now take courage, O Zerubbabel, says the Lord. Take courage, O Joshua, son of Jehoazadok, the high priest. Take courage, all you people of the land, says the Lord. Work, for I am with you, says the Lord of hosts, according to the promise that I made you when you came out of Egypt. My spirit abides among you, and do not fear. For thus says the Lord of hosts, once again in a little while I will shake the heavens and the earth and the sea and the dry land, and I will shake all of the nations, so that the treasure of the nations shall come, and I will fill the house with splendor, says the Lord of hosts. The silver is mine, the gold is mine, says the Lord of hosts. The latter splendor of this house shall be greater than the former, says the Lord of hosts. And in this place I will give prosperity, says the Lord of hosts. So one of the things to understand and to remember, of course, is that when the people were taken out of Israel, when Babylon wiped them out, they destroyed the temple. And with the temple, of course, you destroy a huge chunk of the national and religious identity. It was no small thing that Solomon had built the temple. Up until then, there was no permanent place where God dwelt. And then there was. They housed where they thought God existed. And then for that to be gone, with all the work and all the generations of labor and love and national pride that went into all of that, it was just gone. And then they were gone. And so when they were allowed to return, so when the Persians took over the Babylonians, one of their they thought about the world differently. They thought about conquering as an empire differently. The Babylonians made you kind of assimilate, right? You're gonna come to our place. You're gonna kind of become Babylonian. It's part of the reason why Aramaic becomes a piece of the dialect that Jesus knew. There was assimilation. The Persians didn't really do that. The Persians were more like, hey, listen, do your own thing with, like, you're still gonna, we're still gonna be your rulers and we're still in charge here. But go have your little religion, go have your little government, whatever. Like, do your own thing. Like, we'll even help you. Like, we'll help you restore your temples of worship. We'll do all that. Because that was their ethos when it came to like how to rule as an empire. So that's what happened. But they came across some complications along the way that they didn't expect. So whenever they get back, they just try to settle and figure out, how to rebuild Jerusalem, how to do all that. And then at some point they ran into issues with the folks who would later be the Samaritans. Okay. So the Samaritans were from the north. Those were the people of Israel who were taken over by the Assyrians. They kind of intermarried with those folks, and so they became thought of as lesser than, and they weren't invited into rebuilding everything. And so there was some sabotage that happened, and some political pressure and some violent pressure that was put on the people to not rebuild, and that seemed to be discouraging to them for a long time. So a few decades went by before they were encouraged again to rebuild, and that's what Haggai is doing. He's trying to encourage them to rebuild. So the whole idea behind what Haggai is doing is about, you have this obligation to God, obligation to those who came before you, and you have the opportunity to make things right, to rebuild things, and in fact, better than they were. It's not going to look the same. You don't have all the same resources, but it can be different because of the love and effort and what this one will mean. This will mean something different because it wasn't built out of a sense of accomplishment, like we finally reached the mountaintop, David and Solomon, and we're a united kingdom and all those things. It will be done out of a sense of justice, out of a sense of starting again, forgiveness, gratitude. And with that comes some humility, but also a sense of, um, you know, we understand now the fragility of who we are and what can happen, and that there's going to be a different sense of glory to it because that's true. And so, that's what they started to work on, rebuilding this temple the way they did. And so the story is really about the people claiming for themselves not only the will to do this, like, hey, we should take our time and our resources and our emotional capital and, all the things we have around us. We could be just focused on, building up armies, or we could be focused on harvesting grain. But instead, we're going to invest our time and money and energy into rebuilding this temple, which is a huge undertaking, obviously. And so it took motivation to do that. It wasn't just, snapping their fingers and everything was fine. It was, we have to invest ourselves into this. We have to believe that we are worthy of that. We have to believe that we can accomplish this now. We have to have some sense of personal and national pride in order to make it happen. Excuse me. And I think it kind of has echoes of other times in Israel's national existence where they had to figure out who they were now. They had a lot of emotional digging to do. And one of the times that I think of what is right before they entered the Promised Land. So if you remember, the people had been in slavery in Egypt for 400 years. And then they wander through the wilderness for 40 until they finally come upon the Promised Land. And they get there having survived more than a generation of trial, only to realize that there was going to be a huge hardship in their path, that there were people there that would oppose them. They sent scouts to go and to see if these people, what they could do against these people, and the report they got back was discouraging for most of the scouts. And eventually, a few scouts and Moses and then Joshua were able to convince the people that they should go and they should try, and that God would be with them and that they could do it. But after all that time, they almost didn't do it. They almost said, maybe we should give up. Maybe we shouldn't oppose these people. And it was this moment of recognition that, like, maybe we aren't who God says that we are. And so that sense of identity was still hanging in there. That sense of who are we and are we worthy of this and can we accomplish this was still a huge part of what they were dealing with collectively. And you see an echo of that, I think, in this story, because the reason that the people allowed, the hardship and the distractions and the threats and the manipulation and the, all the other things to kind of get in their way was because I think on some level, they weren't sure if they could be those people again. Can we live into this life and this faith and this temple and this, these people? And I think people like Haggai were there to say, you are those people. You can be those people. This needs to be your priority. This needs to be something that you invest in, because you need this. This will help in the healing process. And when I think about that story, there's so much of who we are that I think rings true in the way this story is told. And you could think about it in a collective sense. We've been thinking about the trials and tribulations of being a church for 100 years and figuring that out, and understanding who we have been so we can better understand who we can be. That's one part of it. Here are the resources we have. Here are the people that we have. Here's the community that we have. Here's the world that we live in. What do we do best with all of that? And how do we create ministries that are faithful to the world that we live in and that reflect who we are? While at the same time, we also can be thinking about that individually. All of us have gone through parts of life where we wonder, can we do the next thing? What if we fail? What does that say about us? Can we actually, if we have a dream or a goal in mind, of course, part of what you do is you kind of wring your hands a little bit and trying to think about, can I actually be the person who accomplishes that thing? And it could be anything. It could be going back to school, or it could be going back to work, or it could be, having children, or it could be, life after children, or it could be, retirement, or it could be moving, or it could be, taking care of a parent or whatever it happens to be, a kind of reinventing of yourself. Can I do the next thing well? Can I actually travel and go see Italy on my own? Can I actually climb that mountain? Can I actually run that marathon? Whatever it happens to be. And, I think we all struggle with the kind of daring ourselves to do what might feel on some level impossible. And, I think that part of what I want to think about and explore and try to speak into is, that experience, that feeling, how we overcome that. What do we do with that? What do we do when the challenge maybe is not manageable? When do we have to give up one dream to fulfill another one? That happens sometimes too. But all of that, I think, is done with a sense of, what does it mean to be restored or renewed or have a new sense of self? What does it mean to kind of shed the things in our past that maybe keep us down or make us feel small or make us feel like we can't? Who were the people? What were the circumstances? What were the limitations? What resources did we lack to make those things happen? What do we know now that we didn't know before? What do we see that we didn't see before? When I think about restoration, sometimes I think about the kind of repair and renewal that we need to be about in all sorts of ways, personally and as a church and as a society. We still have things that we need to repair. We have relationships with other countries. We have relationships with, between ethnic groups. We have relationships between genders. We have relationships between religions. We have relationships between socioeconomic classes. All of those things need to be repaired, restored in some way. And that's a tall order. And it was for Israel, and it would be if we were trying to do that ourselves. But that's part of the point, is seeking restoration means seeking something that isn't the status I'm in now, and searching for something better and more whole. So I want to spend some time thinking about that and looking at that. So that's what I feel like I have for today. I think that was a little bit shorter than I normally go, but I wanted to, that's what I'm thinking about this time around. I'm really looking forward to the next couple of weeks as we get into, those last few things before Advent. I do want to remind you that coming up in December, I do have a 3-week in-person Bible study series that I'm going to be doing at the church. I think I set it for Thursdays at 11. So that's my time here in Advent. So I'm looking forward to that. So yeah, those are the things I wanted to kind of get you thinking about for this week. So I appreciate you doing that with me. Okay. Thank you for being with me today. Thank you for the ways that you pour yourselves into what we do here at Northmont. I hope you have a good week, and I will see you next time for another First Look. Take care.